All right. Xin chào Vietnam, mabuhay Philippines. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're watching from in the world. My name is Jamie from MoveUp, and welcome back to our next episode of Learning and Teaching, Assess, Adapt, Implement. We want this to be an interactive session. Okay, so everyone watching there on social media, what we'd like you to do is in the comment section, write for us, where are you watching from today? So we normally have a lot of viewers from the Philippines, so maybe you can tell us what city in the Philippines that you're watching from. Last time we had people from, of course, Philippines, we had Vietnam, we've had people from as far as the Maldives in these webinars. So please do let us know where you're watching from today. For those of you, okay, the comments just coming in. Thanks for that one, Miles. This is not a one-time event, guys. We are here every Thursday at 3 p.m. Philippines time or 2 p.m. Vietnam time. All right. So let's move on to the topic for today's session. Our topic today is, well, COVID has brought on so many challenges, rather, to the education sector. And however, we can turn COVID-19 into a teachable moment for our students. So in this 7th episode of the Learning and Teaching series, Ms. Samantha Javier, lecturer at Ateneo de Manila University, and also the managing partner from our co-organizer PRAXIS, will be sharing how you can teach disaster literacy to your students. It's a great topic based on a published paper that Sam has written as part of her master's thesis. All right, so before we go on, speaking of PRAXIS, I'd like to give you a quick message from them. So again, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, it's resulted in a huge shift to online operations. So while this might present unique challenges, it also presents difficulties. And if anyone watching, if you need help with maybe your online meetings, conferences, or maybe you have an idea for a webinar series like this one or a one-off webinar, then you can reach out to PRAXIS and they will be able to help you with all your online and virtual events. You can reach them at info@praxis.ph for the free consultation, or also reach out to them on social media. All right. So next up, I'd like to give a big thank you to all our partners for the Learning and Teaching webinar series. So first off, big thank you to Learning Synergies, Marketing in Vietnam, Raket Scientist, Waco Sep. Thank you to Jump Digital. Thank you so much, when in Manila. Thank you so much to the Classroom Free Educator, HR Tech Asia, Bright Lights, Working Mom, Fixer, Combolib Strategies, Nation of Heroes, Sikai, More Than a Desk, Multiple Intelligence International, Beyond Milestones, and DepEd Tayo PSTP. And thank you, of course, to MoveUp and PRAXIS, the co-organizers for this event today. And I won't be able to do this all myself, so I have a team of correspondents who are going to be helping me out with today's session. Okay, so my name is Jamie Duncan. I'm going to be the moderator and the host for today's session. And for Vietnam correspondent, we have our founder and CEO, Mr. Paul Espinas. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Jamie. Can you hear me loud and clear?
Clear?
All right. So first of all, Jamie, today's episode is very close to heart. Our speaker is a good friend. We've been friends for over 12 years. And as a communication graduate, she's been an inspiration for us, that we can really do so much that with our expertise that can impact people's lives, that we teach or that we serve. So Sam has been an inspiration to me, and I'm sure to many others who are watching today. Just a quick shout out, Jamie. Mai is watching from Vietnam. We also have Miss Salvacion Danao watching from Masbate, the island where I'm from. I think it's starting to get famous. We have Miss Gemma who's watching from Pasig City. And here in Vietnam, Jamie, we're currently hosting watch parties to over 12 social media pages. Most of them are groups watch parties for teachers here in Vietnam. We even have groups for Filipino teachers specifically here in Vietnam. So they're also watching with us today. Hello to everyone who's watching from those groups. If you have questions or comments, please feel free to leave them on the comment section from the watch parties, Facebook groups, or Facebook pages that you're watching from. All right, back to you, Jamie.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, so remember, please, if you're watching in one of these Facebook groups, write your comments, write your questions, and Paul will be looking out for them in his Facebook groups. Next up, we have our international correspondent, Ms. Cash Craft. Good afternoon, Ms. Cash.
Good afternoon, Mr. Jamie. Hello, everyone. Mabuhay. So I'll be one of your correspondents today, and we're live in several pages. So if you have any questions or comments to our speaker, feel free to leave it in the comment section, and we'll try our best to make our speaker address all of them. That's it for me, Sir Jamie.
Super. Thank you so much, Cash. Next up, we have our correspondent for the Philippines, Miss Joyce. Mabuhay, Joyce.
Mabuhay, Sir Jamie. So, hello guys, I'm Joyce, your Filipino correspondent, and we are now live to several pages, and I have a few announcements. And we have a contest today. We have a prize that is worth 25,000 pesos, which is a full masterclass access on MoveUp App. And we have lots of free courses in there, and all you have to do is answer Sir Jamie's question later at the end of our panel discussion and send your answer to MoveUp page. And also, for those who want to just avail the access right away, just go to praxis.ph/teachers promo, and there you can avail our Teachers Month promo. Here, there you go, praxis.ph again /teachers promo. That's all, Sir Jamie, back to you.
Thank you, Miss Joyce. Okay, and before we move on, I would like to give a quick shout out to Miss Rona Florentino, our partner. So thank you so much for watching, Miss Rona. I hope it will be an informative session for you too. Second to last, we have our, also for Philippines, Mr. Neon. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Sir Jamie. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Great. Good afternoon and mabuhay to all of our Facebook Live viewers. You know what, Sir Jamie? I've personally read the manuscript of, the one who's actually the basis of this webinar, and I could say that this is very timely webinar because it is important nowadays for our children, younger siblings, and for our students to become disaster resilient. And I really believe that if we really want this younger generation to become disaster resilient, we need to take part in giving them opportunity to first become disaster literate. And I'll tell you, this webinar is a great opportunity for us to learn can get their e-certificate after this webinar. So here's how. So first step, you're gonna download our MoveUp app on Google Play Store and Apple App Store. Here's the download link. It's prx.ph/getmoveup. Number 2, follow the learning and teaching channel. Next step would be from that channel, you can review or rewatch the micro-learning module version of this webinar. Number 4, answer the pre-test and quiz. Don't worry if you fail the pre-test, it's just a self-check. Now, if you get the score of 70% above on the quiz, then you can generate your e-certificate. So that's how you can earn your e-certificate. Thank you, Sir Jamie.
Thank you, Neon. Okay, and last but not least, the most difficult job of correspondent falls to the technical correspondent who is managing everything behind the scenes. Good afternoon, Miss Tony. How are you today?
Good afternoon, Jamie. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm doing great. And thank you, Sam, our boss in Praxis, for being with us to share her experience in DRR and as a teacher. So this is important for me, especially that I have a daughter. So how do we parents and teachers teach our little ones how to handle emergency situations and other disasters that they'll be facing is very, very important. But before we start, I'd like to thank one of our co-organizers, MoveUp. So please watch this video. Okay, so most of us are watching live on Facebook through different pages and groups. So if you have questions to our speaker or if you have insights to share to us or your fellow viewers, please type them on the comment section. And if you're watching from a Facebook group, be sure to access this link, prx.ph/SYFB. Again, that's prx.ph/SYFB. So the speaker can see your comments and questions and we can flash them in the broadcast. So Sam here is our speaker for today, and she's my business bestie, and we work together in Praxis. So if you're curious on what we do in Praxis and in transforming ideas into reality, find out more through this video.
All right, so now it is time for the main part of today's session. So to give you a quick introduction, Ms. Sam Javier describes herself as a Raket Scientist, a communication professional by day, a teacher by night, and a student of life. Aside from managing Praxis, our co-organizer and our partner, and other startups, she also serves as a consultant to the Asian Development Bank NGO and Civil Society Center and Youth for Asia Initiative, as well as the Philippine Department of Education, Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Service. Also during this time of pandemic, Sam has served as a lecturer at the Communication Department at the Ateneo de Manila University and the De La Salle University. Among Sam's many achievements includes being the first Filipina to have been selected as a facilitator for the 31st Ship for World Youth program. This is a global leadership program sponsored by the Cabinet Office, the Government of Japan, where she handled the information and media discussions group. She also bagged the Best Paper Award at the 9th Social Science Conference. And this paper is what this webinar is based on. So I think I've done enough talking. So I'd like to hand the mic over to my good friend, Miss Sam Javier. Take it away, Sam.
Hi, Jamie. Hi, everyone. Finally, I'm not the host. I'm not part of the tech. I am the speaker for today. And thanks for joining us this afternoon. And this is a tall order because this particular topic is based on my 2-year research based on my master's thesis, which we've been repeating over and over again because I can still believe that it's already over. And now it's time to share it to the public. All right, today we will try to cover 3 main topics, which include the roles various stakeholders play in the creation of a disaster resilient community. Number 2, the basis of disaster literacy in the Philippine context. And number 3, emergencies like the coronavirus pandemic as a highly teachable moment. So I hope you get to enjoy this particular session. This is not my thesis defense. All right, guys? Okay, so for sure, we'll spend a day or two if we want to do a deep dive into disaster literacy, disaster education, DRRM or DREAM for some, and what have you. So for today, I am setting a very tall order for our session. We'll do a crash course on disaster literacy and how we could impart this to the young through the work that we do. Okay. I always start my disaster literacy presentations with this African concept, Ubuntu. Ubuntu literally means I am because you are. It reminds us of having compassion for others. A related proverb that is also of African nature in nature reminds us that we belong to a larger unit outside our families. That is the communities that we live in, and their teachers, their parents, and to our guardians. It truly takes a whole village to raise a child. And it was just last week when the world celebrated the fifth anniversary of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, or Agenda for Development, better known as the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. It was also the same week when we commemorated the 75th anniversary of the United Nations General Assembly. Just remember that 75 years ago, the world was still rising from the wrath World War II created in various regions of the globe. Now, we're facing another yet big global emergency that will surely change the way we live and work together. And it's changing the way we live in together, working together as we speak. To help you remember the SDGs, just think of 5 Ps. Okay, as you can see, we have 17 here, and communication students, community development students have memorized this well. Even the hundreds of indicators and other measures of development. But for the general public, just think of 5 Ps: people, prosperity, planet, peace, and partnerships. So you can regroup those 17 goals that you see on your screen into those 5 categories. And while we're at the topic of planet, it is high time for us to talk about the ways by which we could move forward from the pandemic situation. It's so hard to speak about this right now because we're still grappling with it. We're still trying to make amends and try to cope with it, right? But I dare say that how could we, move forward if we don't talk about it now? What we're trying to address, right? So, what use do we have with our money, with tall buildings and high education, if we do not have a livable planet in the first place? And what use do we have with the economic, social, and personal development that we have if climate change takes a toll over our lives? And what is the use of development today if the future of the generations to come are at stake? So risks are everywhere. Today, the coronavirus pandemic poses a great health risk to us all, especially the vulnerable ones. But why talk about disasters right now when the world is grappling with the pandemic? I may sound crazy because am I giving more depression and sad things to talk about? But I also dare say it's all the more that we should talk about it now, as in now. And the people of Asia and the Pacific are no strangers to disasters. The Philippines, for one, is at a high risk of several natural hazards like tropical cyclones, earthquakes, floods, and droughts. Human planned hazards are also present in conflict stricken areas. Two big typhoons, namely Milenio and Ondoy, struck the country in September 2006 and 2009, respectively. And this is very fresh in our minds. And just last week, we were surprised with memes or other digital cards reminding us of those two big typhoons. But there's more to it, right? Super Typhoon Haiyan left the world in shock in November 2013. Up to this day, some families are still recovering from this disaster. Amid all of these disasters, one thing's for sure: there's always a human element to it. That is why, take note of this, guys, there is no such thing as a natural disaster. Volcanic eruptions are natural. It's part of the geologic nature of the Earth. So are typhoons. So are other natural hazards. But death or casualty due to those natural hazards aren't. And now, the coronavirus pandemic has been with us for over 9 months to date, and we don't know until when this will be with us, until when the vaccine will be available to the general public and not just the elite, and talks about the new normal and ways by which we could live more simply and sustainably, are gaining a foothold in social media spaces and even in mainstream organizations in mainstream news orgs. However, we tend to forget that it is not just the adults who are highly affected by the pandemic. The young also are. And even if a lot of schools are closed now, and we see the adoption of remote learning schemes left and right, dear parents and teachers, let us take this as a highly teachable moment. We cannot blame teachers and parents too, as they are also afflicted by health hazards and receive the same pressure others feel because of the trying times we are all living in. Disaster risk reduction indeed begins at school. Let us start them young. But how do we even do that? I will take you through four big words first. Kindly take note of this. First is risk reduction. Second, disaster literacy. Third, school age children, which is self explanatory. And fourth, vulnerable community. We will try to deconstruct these words one by one. They're so big and immense, all right? Disasters pose a great risk to the development gains of a family, a company, a community, or a nation. Let us take typhoon as an example of a natural hazard. Typhoons are natural hazards that can cause disasters to a family or a community. If a certain community got inundated by floods due to the typhoon, their personal and community properties are also at great risk of being lost, right? That's one of the many aspects the discipline of community development analyzes with respect to developing communities from the ground up. And it's not top down. What you can see on the left hand side of your screen is the framework for community development for empowerment and transformation. That is development that is not charity based, but is empowering, that is participatory, not tokenistic, and that is respectful of human rights. It is composed of three major components and processes called community organizing, community education, community resources management, and disaster risk management. And if you take the blue triangle above and further deconstruct it, you will see community environment, social enterprises, and community economics within it. Sounds complex? Well, we will try to figure out where we are in. Okay? And if we talk about risk can actually be quantified as hazards and vulnerabilities over capacities. Simply put, to reduce one's risk, we should work for the raising of their capacities. Why do we even wear face masks? For sure, a lot of people have asked you or your family members about it. Well, science says it that we can reduce the risk of transmission of aerosol droplets from one person to another. That's the same thing. When talking about contemporary global issues, climate change and disaster risk reduction and management should also take center stage. In today's world, it is not enough to be able to do the three R's, namely reading, writing, and arithmetic. One should be able to have several literacies under their belt, be it computer literacy. Well, I'm pretty sure you are computer literate and technology literate now because you can access StreamYard, you can access Facebook, and what have you. You can also be culturally literate. And now I am including disaster literacy in that long list of 21st century literacies that we need to have to be able to survive and thrive. The five pillars of UNESCO's Education for Sustainable Development, or ESD, calls for the development of skills and competencies out of the core subjects being taught to learners and for integrating sustainability themes into the curriculum teachers. And this must not just come from the natural sciences, which is the norm, but from all subjects. Sports and disasters, music and disasters, why not? In terms of disaster literacy for the 21st century, the five pillars of education: learning to know, learning to do, learning to live together, learning to be, and learning to transform oneself and society tells us that A child must be aware of disaster risk reduction and management, or DRRM, or DREAM for some, must have the necessary competencies for protecting themselves, especially in times of emergencies, must be sensitive to the needs of their peers and immediate community members in pursuit of harmony and peace, be able to progress into adulthood by having access to quality education, and be critical of their role in the development of their community amid climate change and towards sustainable development. We are already past the discourse about children being passive recipients of knowledge and victims of disasters. They have the right to development, to survival, to protection, and to participation. All of those are in the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And having a truly inclusive and child centered disaster risk reduction and management in education framework invites us all to make our programs more child led and not just child focused. The Philippine Department of Education espoused global agreements like the Comprehensive Safe Schools Framework, or CSSF, as you can see in the three pillars at the bottom, included the disaster risk management cycle of response, preparedness, prevention and mitigation, and recovery and rehabilitation, as you can see on the right hand. And this all emphasize that children's education must not be disrupted, be delivered with high quality, and be managed well. So now you can understand why our LGUs are working for the continuation of education even in the time of pandemic, because it is the right of the child for their education to not be disrupted in these times, even in these trying times. And at the heart of disaster literacy is child development. Yuri Bronfenbrenner, an American psychologist, argued that the whole ecological system, which is composed of five subsystems that affects a child's development, must be considered. In the first figure on your left, you can see that particular model as nested. In Tagalog, it's patong-patong. Just like how Russian dolls are placed one on top of another. A child's microsystem includes their family, while the mesosystem, the relations between the parent and teacher, say through the Parents Teachers Association. Up above this layer is the exosystem that includes educational policies like K 12. And way above is the macrosystem that covers phenomena like societal views on education. In the Philippine context, some of us view education as the great equalizer, or, a ticket to success. On the right of your screen, in 2013, Neil and Neil proposed a network version of Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory. Here, they emphasize that the different systems affecting a child's development can be overlapping. Now, let's go to defining who the vulnerable are. So I already defined risk reduction and then disasters, and now vulnerable. In my own research that I did for my master's degree, I was given the chance to work with a vulnerable community. They were vulnerable because the barangay, the smallest unit of government in the Philippines, faces a lot of hazards. They have flooding, rainfall-induced landslide, and liquefaction, on top of having a segment of their population living below the poverty line. The barangay may be situated in one of the richest cities in the country where I came from, but the income gap is very stark and poses a high risk to vulnerable populations, especially in times of disasters. And speaking of vulnerable populations, they are not just the poor. They also include pregnant women, persons with disabilities, and small children. Oh, hey, it's so depressing now, no? But how can we avert this situation and create a disaster resilient and climate smart community? Because this is our reality, my dear brothers and sisters in Asia and the Pacific. We are in the Pacific Ring of Fire. We're facing a lot of these natural hazards day and night, year in, year out, right? And one way is through community education, where disaster literacy sits. Disaster literacy's formal education or definition came from the health context. Hiram in Tagalog. It was just borrowed, or for the others, bastardized. It was defined as the ability to read, understand, and use information to make informed decisions and follow instructions in the context of the disaster risk management cycle of mitigating, preparing, responding, and recovering from a disaster. I dare say that disaster literacy should also be measured as a functional literacy here in the Philippines or even in other countries, just like how we measure the Filipino adults' functional literacy in terms of media and numeracy skills. So we're familiar with the census, right? And from time to time, every 5 years or so, we also measure the functional literacy of the Filipino. Why don't we add this? Because we can tell that a person is media literate if they know how to engage with the media. We can tell if a person knows basic arithmetic if they can perform simple operations without the use of calculators. Why are we not measuring children's disaster literacy? Uh-huh. A scanning of literature on disaster education gives us the following competencies of a disaster literate child. A child's disaster literacy may be measured in terms of three learning components, namely knowledge, attitudes, and practices. So I'm not sure if you can see the figure really clearly, but let me go through each component and what's included in there. Okay, so you don't have to read a lot of journals anymore because I did it for you. For knowledge, a disaster literate school age child can recognize disaster. They can read and understand emergency protocols. They're aware of local hazards. They know the concept of climate change, and there are not deniers. They know the authority figures or who to listen to in times of emergencies. And they understand that they have access to information on the RRM. In terms of attitudes, they recognize the emotions that they felt during disasters, or if they were exposed to certain medias, to certain movies that are scary in nature. So they are also sensitive to vulnerable sectors that, just like we mentioned, the pregnant women, PWD, smaller children, older persons, etc., etc. They have positive attitudes towards the RRM, and they respect indigenous knowledge and different faiths vis-a-vis disasters because uh, uh, places like the Philippines for sure have a lot of indigenous knowledge about disasters. Some people say that if the dogs bark, well, there might be an earthquake, but science would tell us that well, earthquakes cannot be predicted. But then again, if faith comes in, if the indigenous knowledge comes in, you have to respect and try to make a compromise in between so as for the whole community to be safe, right? And then they're also hopeful for the future and they are willing to be capacitated. They are in touch with their emotions and reactions to media products on disasters. So, a note here is not to prevent children from feeling fear because fear is normal. Even adults feel fear. Now we are fearful for the future. When will this pandemic end, right? And in terms of practices, school disaster literate school age children, they participate in school or community based organizations. They have Red Cross voluntary organizations. They have the school government called Supreme People Government here in the Philippines. They also have eco clubs, something like that, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, etc., etc. And they also cooperate with evacuation protocols and drills. But here in the Philippines, it's kind of automatic because every quarter there's always an earthquake drill inside the school, and they also apply their learnings from school on the RM in everyday life. So they kind of bring back whatever they learned from the school back to home, and they also share their lessons on the RRM to family and peers. So this is a very important note for teachers and for parents. Listen to your children. They are effective risk communicators. And whatever they learned at school, they're gonna share it for sure. So listen to them. They have something to say, and we might as well learn the new protocols, the trends from them. This begs us to ask the question: how can disaster literacy enable an inclusive and child centered approach to the RRM among school aged children in a vulnerable community? In my own research, I have proposed that the levels of knowledge and practice and the direction of attitude of school aged children be measured just like how we measure grades or their performance in class through grades. In quantifying their disaster literacy, I had to put all of the competencies I just mentioned uh, in question format. Something that they can answer with a yes, no, with an exact answer, or with a level of agreement or disagreement. This led my research to the creation of a CAP scale, which was based on how psychometricians also measure behavioral change through social psychological means. Through this, a certain child can have high level of knowledge, an excellent direction of attitude, but a low level of practice. Sounds familiar? Yeah. You can be knowledgeable enough about waste segregation. I'm pretty sure you all know that. And even the 3 R's, but you can feel meh about it and not do it at all. I'm pretty sure we are all guilty of that. And in the same study, I found out that the children all had moderate levels of knowledge, attitudes, and practices towards this DRRM. This clearly tells us that we do not have to start from square one every single time. Our students may already know the earthquake protocol, dock, cover, and hold, but still feel frightened and lost whenever an earthquake strikes, even a weak one. We do not have to start from square one. They may already know the typhoon signals. They already know what disasters are, the vulnerable populations are. Why don't we step up, right? It also calls us for all stakeholders to all have hands on deck. As you can see in this beautiful mess of mine, I know this is not the most beautiful illustration that I could have, but this is the conception of what child-centered disaster risk reduction and management in a vulnerable community is. There are several stakeholders that can carry out several duties informing disaster literate children. It's not just the government, it's not just the school, it's not just the parents, it's not just the NGOs or the private sector. And this might be our only chance at opposing poverty in the disaster risks as our capacity building programs and our concerted effort to make sure all of our disaster risk reduction and management efforts are in sync. In Filipino, I will say this, walang kanya-kanya. And if there are silos in the system, we should be able to point them out easily because it's already in the diagram. And teachers, just to inspire you, we are at the Community Center for Disaster Resilience in the community. Parents, you are the supporters of this mission. Listen to your children too. The media and NGOs, being in the public ecosystem, must continue to support communities and the local school boards for the tailor fitting of such modules into the local context of their communities. One size does not fit all, again and again and again. That's already a law of sorts in the communication industry. Do away with the use of fear appeal in your messaging. It doesn't help to scare away children about disasters without telling them that it is normal to feel fear, but we can also do something. We are not helpless. Local chief executives and disaster risk reduction management offices must continue to have oversight of the overall governance of DRRM in their localities. That is why we are always asking for accountability. It's not just complaining for complaining's sake, because it is their duty after all. And in measuring the current disaster literacy of a young and vulnerable population segment or sector, stakeholders of child-centered disaster risk reduction and management should also be better informed as to what the current competencies of the students are. That's why I came up with that scale because we can quantify where we are starting, right? They should also know what to do and who their partners are in advocating for the culture of disaster resiliency. And that's the end of my talk. If you are interested in reading the full thesis, it's actually 260 pages in all, where this talk was based upon. Kindly visit prx.ph slash disaster lit paper. And if you didn't catch that. So just connect with us through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or LinkedIn. Just look for our handle, Praxis PH. And to our teachers, to our disaster literacy champions, October is a very special month for us because October 5 is International Teachers Day and October 13 is International Day for Disaster Risk Reduction. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Miss Sam. Wow. All right. So we will be inviting back Miss Sam later on for the panel discussion. So please do not go anywhere and start thinking of your questions that you want to ask to Miss Sam. So first of all, I have a question for you guys watching on social media. If you want to claim a certificate or you'd like to share this session with your friends or colleagues, please write me in the chat box. Again, if you want to claim a certificate for today's session, or you want to share this talk with some of your friends or colleagues, please write in the comment section, me, all right? Just waiting for the comments to come in there. Okay, so I think the majority of people, you probably want to know how to claim your certificate if there's a certificate available. The news is, yes, we do have a certificate available for this session. In the MoveUp app, we have created a course for this. Here the comments are coming in now. We have created a course based on Sam's presentation, teaching disaster literacy among school-aged children. We'll give you a little bit more instructions later on how to claim the certificate in the app, but there is a test and you must pass at least 70%. We have also created a channel specifically for teachers and educators, okay? So within the MoveUp app, please do subscribe to our learning and teaching channel where you'll be able to access not only this presentation from Ms. Sam Javier, but also all of the previous speakers that we've had for this learning and teaching series. And you will also get notified when a new course becomes available for this series, all right? Okay, so let's move on. You're probably wondering, what is MoveUp? Let's watch this video to find out. Okay, and this is just as a reminder, please don't go anywhere because we still have a prize to win for today's session. So the prize is unlimited access to all of our masterclass style content in the MoveUp app. These are high-level production contents that we've co-created with influential coaches and trainers with a value of 25,000 Philippine pesos. And today you will win this for free. Okay, you just have to listen out for my question after the panel discussion. Okay, so stay tuned for that one. And if that's not enough, we're not running only one webinar series. We have 2 webinar series running right now. So every Thursday, we have our learning and teaching webinar series. On Tuesdays, we have HR, What's Next? This webinar All right, this webinar series is designed to help HR professionals with topics such as employee engagement and many, many more. All right, and once again, I'd like to give a big thank you to all of our partners for this series and an extra special thank you to our media partner for this event, which is When in Manila. We'll be right back after this video. Okay, and next I'd like to invite back Miss Sam Javier for our panel discussion. Welcome back, Miss Sam.
Hi, Jamie.
All right, so I'm sure we've got a lot of questions from the audience. So I just want to remind everyone watching right now on Facebook that we can see all your comments live. So if you have a question for Miss Sam, please do write it in the comment section. However, I think I would like to start with a question, if I may, Sam.
All right, bring
All
it
right.
on.
Okay, so bearing in mind this isn't your thesis defense as well, so I'll try not to. I'll
Don't
try
carry away.
not to because I know how that feels, Sam. Okay, so my question for you, Miss Sam, is how can we effectively mobilize key players in the you mentioned the macro system level in taking part on educating grade school students to become disaster literate?
Hmm. All right, a great question there. Yeah, this is a reality check for everyone. Actually, for all Filipinos, we have very, very good laws. We're compliant with international agreements as well. We have a lot of guiding policies already, memos in the form of forms in the Department of Education. For sure, we can maximize this all through conversations, through genuine dialogue. And as what my former professor says, start from where the people are and build on what they have. So we always need to go back to our strengths. Not it's looking at things differently, Jamie, because especially now, remember our talk about appreciative inquiry with Doc M's, right? So now that we have a lot of problems along our way, we need to look at things from a different light, not to romanticize stuff, but to work on our strengths, because sometimes we just don't realize that we already have the enabling environment, the laws, and other programs that we need to tap into. And that's why I emphasize the term walang kanya-kanya. One should be working for the benefit of all, and it's not just for his or her family, not just for their community, not just for our country, because if especially sustainable development and climate change, it is a global issue. It is a global matter that we should take into our hands.
All right, thank you so much, Miss Sam. We've got another question coming in from Miss Joyce. Miss Joyce, are you there?
Hi, Joyce.
Hello, Miss Sam. Hello, sir. Can you hear me, Miss Sam?
Yes.
Yep. So here's my question: how can a teacher integrate DRRM into their daily lesson plan?
The practical side, teachers. Okay, yeah, we're being asked to create weekly and daily lesson plans, right? And the RRM does, we're there's this study also that was conducted by my own thesis advisor. We don't need to create a new subject. No, not anymore, because our children already have a lot on their plate. We need to integrate this DRRM lessons in our daily lesson plans. For example, if there's a disaster that struck your community, you can talk about it. You can use it as a case study and be mindful of those children who were directly affected. Okay. So this is kind of a pressure as well for teachers, because we are not trained psychologists or psychiatrists, right? But it also pays to have a listening ear to our students. And for preventive measures, because again, it's a cycle: prevention, mitigation, etc., etc. For the prevention side, we can create very interactive learning activities in our daily classes that integrates these themes. After all, we come up with word problems. Even in math, you can integrate disasters. You can include those computations about risk, about preparing a community for a disaster. Remember the game Sims, right? It's about urban development and disaster risk reduction. So yeah, those are just some examples by which we can integrate the RRM in the daily lesson plans.
Thank you, Miss Sam.
I couldn't agree more, Sam, because as educators, we need to be able to adjust our lesson plan and the way that we educate students depending on the situation of the day. We need to be really engaging the students, and the best way to engage them is to use topical things like I've used coronavirus so many times as a teachable moment. I've used it for debate lessons. For example, in Vietnam, when coronavirus first started, everyone thought the government's reaction was over the top because all the schools were shut down. So, that could be a teachable moment. They can comment on, do they think the government's response was appropriate or not? So yeah, I couldn't agree more with that one, Ms. Sam.
Yeah, it's from the ground up. It's also the same way we develop communities, right? So always look at how your students think about it and build on what they already know.
Fantastic. We've got a couple of audience questions coming in now. I'd like to start with Bam Smith asks, is it important for learning centers to promote risk disasters in kindergarten and primary? So I think we were talking before maybe about the older students. What about the kids?
Because school age children here are grades 4 to 6, or those in the elementary school already. For kindergarten or primary, it's more challenging for sure. But remember, the comprehensive safe schools framework tells us that there are three pillars. One is about infrastructure. It's important because we can have very effective capacity building programs for earthquake preparedness, for typhoon preparedness. But if the infrastructure is not sturdy, we're all at risk, right? So it has to go hand in hand. It's three. So first is the school infrastructure. Second is about education, and third is about governance. So in the first, the civil engineers, other professionals come in there, and then for the second, it's the teachers, and then for the third, it's the school administrators. So going back to the question, for kindergarten, it's well, from the governance side, we have to make sure our centers are safe first. So do hazard mapping, do risk analysis about the buildings, especially if you're situated in a multiple hazard community, just like what we have in our case study. And then for children, tailor fit those lessons that will be very, very relatable to children of that age, because they also feel fear. Try talking to kids nowadays. They know that the coronavirus pandemic is happening, because
Yeah.
why is everyone in masks? It's kind of weird, right? What happened? And why can't we go out? Why can't I play with my playmates? So you can explain those things to them, and remember, let them know that we can do something for this. You can wash your hands, and then you can stay away for a meter or so. And you don't need to tell them about those technical stuff. About remember the pepper test that that went viral?
Yeah.
It's about washing your hands, right? And making those germs go away. So it's very graphic. It's very visual. So also maximize the multiple intelligences that our kids have.
Yeah, with my experience working with young learners as well, you need to try and gamify these disaster-related
Yep.
information. You can play songs for them or something about washing their hands. There's so much you can do, and you'd be really surprised as to, even for the young kids, the insight and understanding that they can get out of them.
It's so profound, Jamie. You'll be surprised with these kids.
Mm.
I was chatting with, these are adults squeezed in small
Right?
containers. Yeah.
Next question we have from Miss Gemma. She says, "Hi Sam, congrats and thank you for sharing with us your thesis study." Her question is, what do you think we may add to make earthquake drills in school more effective? Earthquake drills, is this something you do often in the Philippines?
Yeah, it's quarterly.
Wow.
Quarterly for schools and even for the national government, but due to the coronavirus pandemic, they were canceled. Yeah, and rescheduled. But yeah, we can't, you know, we still need to do this continuous education because we don't really know when this will strike, right? And what can we do to make them more effective? Well, the first question is, how do we measure the effectiveness of earthquake drills in the first place? There's an anecdote from my community. The principal was telling me that there was one time a funeral procession going on in their community. And
Mm.
then this family borrowed the megaphone, and it has a siren attached to it. They used that particular siren to make the people part ways so they can move forward with the funeral procession going to the cemetery. You know what, Jamie, what happened? There was a class in that particular elementary school, and the kids did the duck cover and hold because it was the same siren that's being used during earthquake drills. So
Wow.
mind you, teachers, yeah, for our school administrators here, be mindful also of the things that we associate things with. So that's just an audio file, but our kids really learned it and applied it on a daily life.
Yeah.
So
Well, at least the training was effective.
yeah, in that case, we can tell that it is effective. So one thing to ask ourselves is, how do we measure effectiveness? Well, in that case, it was applied in practice. And in the future, if a disaster strikes or if an earthquake strikes, and there were no casualties, and we can attribute that particular phenomenon to the capacity building program, that yeah, because we did quarterly drills and it's like normal for everyone to do the cover and hold and not just laugh and ask and check their social media, did an earthquake really happen? Something like, so it's effective in that manner. Mm-mm.
Sure. We have another question from Sir John, more about the parent side of things, because education, of course, happens not only in school, in class, but also in the home, of course.
Yeah.
So John's asking, based on the current situation, how are we going to involve parents in teaching our children the true value of disaster risk reduction, and how does that relate to lifelong learning?
Yeah, good, very, very good question. Because the model upon which I hinge my thesis upon talks about the children being initiators of disaster risk reduction and disaster education in the community, and then the parents and other community members as congregation members. They're like creating ripples of change in the community whenever they share what they learn from school. And in the Philippine context, we always look at schools as, you know, centers, and whoever goes into a school is privileged, right? And they have opportunities in front of them, right? So but today, well, this note is for the government as well and for the NGO sector, for media. Let us also help our parents in capacitating their children, because we can't really just, devolve and pass the responsibility solely to them. We should also ensure that whatever information they receive from the media about the coronavirus pandemic, about disasters, is accurate. And
Yes, for
because, we have to help each other. And parents don't just rely on teachers. It goes hand in hand, right? And it's it's been a perennial debate about who should really form our children. Again, the African proverb tells us that it really takes a whole village to raise a child. This community education must come from all sides. And yeah, I have a printed version of my framework here. Yeah, each node there represents a venue where these stakeholders can converge. Say a CPR training.
right.
Say, what do you call this again? Every March, the fire prevention month. Yeah, I already did the fire hazard thing and with the use of the fire extinguisher. So yeah, let's not rest or give that responsibility solely to each social institution. Everyone must come in, and we should not forget about the systemic gaps that we have in. We should also make the government accountable in every single disaster that comes our way.
Mm. So basically, we should all be sharing responsibility for
Yes,
disaster literacy,
yes.
right, Sam?
Mm-mm.
Sure. We have another question, this time from our correspondent, Mr. Neon. Good afternoon, sir. I believe you have a question for Miss Sam. Neon? Okay, maybe
Around, yeah. It's fine, Jamie.
we'll take another audience question.
Ah, there.
Good afternoon again, and first,
Hi,
yeah, I do
Neon.
have, and I think let's entertain some of the questions from our viewers as well.
All
Can you
right.
hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, let me hear Neon. You have a question for Miss Sam? And we've lost him. All right.
This is the reality, and we have to have contingency plan in times
Right.
of disasters. What's your contingency plan, Jamie?
We have, Sam, I've got no problems for questions.
All
Uh,
right.
okay,
Hello,
so
can you hear me?
Yes, yes, yes.
yes, Neon. Neon, do you want to ask your question for Sam? He had some- okay, let's go to the
I
audience.
like
We
how
have a question
engaging
from
this discussion
Baby
is,
Ab.
and I think before.
We lost him again. We have a question from Bebe Av. She,
Mm-hmm.
how do we go about teaching disaster drills online?
Yeah, this is the first time I got this question. Okay. Yeah. Why did I even forget our own project? Okay. We have lots of tools. Use these educational technologies that we have. I've just mentioned Sims, and I'm not just promoting it just for the sake of promoting it. I'm saddened by the departure of Farmville from Facebook, because it's also one way of teaching our children about sustainable livelihoods, right? And yeah, you can do a lot. We can convert our existing modules, our existing materials, communication materials, information, education, and communication materials. It can be leaflet, it can be an AVP or what have you, into comics, into online episodes, into webinars, and whatever suits your audiences. So always do a media literacy check first before going out with your communication materials. Yeah. And we have a special project also with the Department of Education, but I can't really tell it. Watch out, guys.
Good.
It's very exciting virtual space. I can tell. But there's something brewing, yeah.
Well, it's the top secret. I look forward to hearing more about that, Sam, when for the big reveal. Okay, we have another audience question. So many questions today, Sam. It's a super, super, super interesting topic. So this is probably one of the most active audiences that we've had for this series so far. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Next question we have is from Sylvester. So Sylvester asks, you alluded to indigenous DRR. How is traditional knowledge being taught in schools right now? Despite the lack of acceptance, education materials, and teacher capacity in remote indigenous cultural communities. And if you could share any success or challenge in this niche.
Mm-mm. I must admit that in my study, was hardly a mention of indigenous knowledge. It's just about ants, crawling around whenever there's um, rain or typhoon, and then cockroaches coming around, flying around whenever, yeah, it's for the same hazard. But in peace education, what I encountered last year, and this is a segue already, this is not disaster literacy, but still can be connected because there are human planned hazards, like terrorism, right? In terms of peace education, what's happening, especially this came from Abra in the northern section of the Philippines, northern region. What they do is that they always consult the Council of Elders in that particular indigenous group what should be taught to the students and what should be integrated, what lessons, what values, what type of student are we trying to form,
Mhm.
who is respective of his or her origin, of his or her culture, and who works for peace and for reconciliation. So that's just an example that we can do this for disasters in the future. Yeah, a lot of things to dwell on in terms of research. Don't be afraid of research, guys. It's our friend.
Yeah, I agree. My master's is actually also in research. I think we have a question from Mr. Paul Espinas. Good afternoon, sir.
Hello, Jamie. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
All right. So, Miss Sam, we have a lot of watch parties that we're hosting. So there's also an ongoing conversations. There's some people who are asking where they can get a copy of your presentation. Actually, so I think we're gonna flash that on our screen very soon. I think coming from a very corporate background, Miss Sam, my question would be: do you think there is a possibility there that probably companies might have a training for parents in the Philippines, most especially, on how to teach their kids about disaster literacy? What are the possible partnerships, corporate, academic, that's available, probably from your experience or from your research that we can utilize moving forward regarding disaster literacy?
Yeah, you're really coming from the private sector, Paul. Why did that even include that here? Something to revise in my framework. No, 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 just kidding. The private sector can always come in wherever because we're
Mm,
partners, right? We're
yeah.
partners for development. You can always go to the local government and ask, "What can I do to help? Can I assist you in procuring life-saving materials?" And then you can both come up with an activity like the WASAR, water safety and rescue activities. It could be fun. And for the private sector side, yeah, we're also coming from there. uh, the very fact that you're contributing to the resilience of that particular community speaks a lot about the values of your organization. You're contributing, and we're talking about not about CSR anymore. It's corporate social value now, right? And you are part of this ecosystem, the private sector, because you have the means that the government has a lot to do, and uh, it's it's gonna take a whole village. Whatever we see right now in the coronavirus response, it speaks a lot about how in the future hazards that we will face. For sure, we will face a lot. Yeah, it's a given fact. It's not an if, but a when, right? Uh, yeah, we can all come in there. And you
Yeah.
know the
Thank you so
words.
much for that, Sam. Yeah.
That,
I think we're gonna add that, Jamie, on our learning and development module in the company, how to teach our staffs in the Philippines, especially the parents, how to actually teach their kids on this disaster preparedness, right? I think that's something that is missing. I grew up in an island where there's a volcano nearby. We're living by the shore, so there's a tidal wave possibility when there's typhoon, and we do all these drills and so on. But at that time, we just follow where our parents go or where our parents would bring us without really fully understanding the on a deeper level what's happening. So thank you so much for that, Miss Sam.
yeah.
Thanks, Paul.
I think maybe Miss Sam can help us co-create that module, how to teach disaster awareness.
Sure.
All right, I'll hold you to that, Sam. So I'd like to take another question from the audience, again from Bam Smith. So this is about online education. So Bam Smith asks, how will we make this DRRM? How will it be done essentially? Now that the recent pandemic has made our education online. So essentially, how do you teach disaster preparedness in an online setting? Maybe you're using Zoom or whatever platform.
Mm. If we're gonna, okay, yeah, there's no way to do it physically for sure, especially
Mm,
with the lockdowns that we're doing. And we all know that there's something behind it, right? And
mm,
in teaching our children about the recent pandemic, You can use the real life examples. Even in your class, in your school, you can always refer to what's happening with them, because we can always tell them that, oh, this is the reason why we're doing physical distancing, so and so and so. But make sure your sources are correct. uh, it's like the WHO, DOH, etc. And to answer your question for physical, I'm sorry, but we can't really do anything about it. Even in research, it's hard to do research now because you can't really go down the ground. And how can we make sure that we're targeting or addressing the needs of the vulnerable when we can only reach those who have access to digital devices and who have the right skills? Again, we're going back to the digital divide and other issues, right? They're all cross-cutting. And for modular, because they're printed materials and what have you, you can come up with certain activities that they
Mhm.
can do at home, like looking for the hazards inside their home and then identifying them. You can also make the parents engage in such activities. So that's just an example. A lot, actually. So just think out of the box and go back to the learning outcomes that we want to see, the competencies that we want to see in terms of knowledge, attitudes, and practices, and convert those into uh, modules online, activities online. And it doesn't need to be really nerdy and geeky. uh, just take a stab in it. We're all learning here. It's a new terrain. Yeah. Mm-mm.
Yeah, I think we need to be quite creative in the ways that we can implement these into our lesson plans. So one that I've used before personally is that I had the kids as part of like a project, working together to create an earthquake evacuation plan. So what to do with in an earthquake. We had a lesson generally about earthquakes, and then it was down to them to research how do you actually deal with it, and then they present it
Mm-mm.
to class. So
Mm-mm.
also,
Actually, yeah, actually, Jamie, thanks for reminding me about that, because there's all again, we have lots of materials already. We just don't know that they exist. We also have a standard family emergency evacuation plan, and what have you, from the national government agencies tasked to do it. So yeah, make it public, make it known for everyone. Yeah. Mm-mm.
for sure. Yeah, so we're getting lots of very positive comments from that one. Bam Smith says you're engaging and amazing. I couldn't agree more, Sam.
Thank you, po.
All right, we have a question here from Miss Jaisel. I think she's watching from Singapore, and she asks, "Hi, Miss Sam. Do you have any suggestions for when disaster comes? What should be the best for all, not just the government, but for the community?" I think what she's asking here is, how can we, in a community, better prepare ourselves for disaster?
Mm-mm. Make well, for one, make disaster preparedness a norm, not
Mm.
an exemption. It should be normal. We should not laugh at others participating in drills. I pity them. I mean, come on, guys. It's for the safety of all. And I know you won't really know when these hazards would strike, right? And this is a profound question because it talks about community disaster risk reduction and management. It's a whole lot. It's one course, actually. It's a discipline. And it tells us that there's actually a model that tells that the first step is self-help.
Mhm.
Okay? Make sure you are prepared. Do not just rely on your family members, especially if you're a parent. No, you have other responsibilities. You have to take care of your kids. You have to make sure that they are safe. Well, so how can you help others if you don't know how to help yourself? First, self-help. Next
Mhm.
is mutual help. That's a community level. In the Filipino context, it's kapitbahayan, the neighborhood.
Mhm.
One for the other, right? You always take care of the others. If you know that someone in the other house is an older person or who has disabilities, well,
Mhm.
then good for you that you're able, and then make sure that you can help them in times of emergencies. Third, is for the government side. So that's it's on an escalation mode from mutual help, self help, mutual help, and then the public help. That's where the government comes in. But I'm not saying that we should not rely on the government because again and again, in human rights based approach to development, the government has the duty to ensure that our rights, our right to life, our right to development, to adequate food, to education, even in times of disasters, are being met.
Mm.
Okay. Yeah, and we have to prepare, not reactive. That is why there's already a shift in the paradigm that tells us that okay, we have to be prepared in terms of emergencies. That's emergency preparedness. We're already past that. We
Mm.
have to mitigate these factors that make our environment uninhabitable. Again, we won't have uh, we won't have any use with our money, with our education, if our planet is not livable at all. So it has to start with the community. Know your community. And yeah, this is what you can do today. Check your house and call an engineer if you need help. Yeah, especially if you're sitting near the for the Greater Manila area. If you're living near the West Valley Fault, make sure that your house is sturdy enough. It's compliant with the building code 2010 of the national government of the Philippines. That's what you can do. And yeah,
Yes,
sorry, just to add, just to add.
there's so many
Make sure
questions.
you also have your go bags because in times of emergencies, that's the only weapon that you can have. And make sure that uh, it will last you for 3 days. Yeah, at least. Mm-mm.
I think we can make a whole separate webinar about that, Sam.
Yeah.
Sam's advice for disasters. We have one question here from one of our correspondents, Miss Cash. Miss Cash, I believe you have a question for Sam. Miss Cash?
Yes. Hello. Hello.
Hi,
Can
Cash.
you hear me? Hello.
Yep.
So hi, Miss Ham. Very interesting talk. I have here one
Cash,
question.
can you hear us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So how can we
Right.
prevent
Can you hear Sam?
disinformation?
Yeah,
Yes.
okay, we're back.
Okay, so how can you prevent disinformation acts during and after the implementation of disaster literacy education campaigns? So, if it with I'd like to contextualize it because sometimes if we would educate children about this, there's this they would feel this fear about disaster. So how can we address this the possible disinformation that could come from this?
It's hard to prevent disinformation even in times of disasters, but okay. This goes back to media and information literacy, right? My other bias. We have to know what kind of what's our responsibility as consumers and producers of information. For example, if you saw an article in your news feed that tells us that an earthquake is coming, well, first check the source. You do not have to check the source if you know from your science class that earthquakes cannot be predicted, right? So if you shared that to your friends, you have just committed an act of disinformation. You might not have deliberately done it. I mean, to misinform everyone, but uh, always make sure that whatever you share online is accurate and is verified. So always check your source. And a news organization here always tells us to think before you click, right? But in times of disasters, of course, everything's chaotic. I can tell that now we can always check if our are correct or not. But in times of disasters, we can only rely with word of mouth, with passing of text messages, right? Especially if the internet connection has been cut off. So again, we will go back to the principle of knowing who is the authority. And to those in the authority, in the national government agencies, in the school, the local officials, parents, kindly be wary of the information you also share because the kids are listening to you. They look up to you. Whatever you say is almost gospel truth. So please make sure that we are responsible producers of information as well. Mm-mm.
For sure. If I might add on that one, Sam, I recently taught a lesson specifically about fake news and misinformation. And,
Mm.
you know, I think really misinformation is a pandemic in and of itself.
Yes.
One that's arguably more difficult to deal with than COVID, right? Because, you know, maybe we'll get the vaccine for COVID and then, you know, that'll be sorted out hopefully next year. Misinformation is entirely more systemic. And my advice for dealing with misinformation is to use we call it the 5 C's of critical consuming. Are you familiar, Sam?
Yeah, I've heard. Yeah, kindly share, Jamie.
Sure. So we have number 1 C is context, right? So we should be checking when was the article written, have events changed since then, is there any new information, right? So that's context. Number 2 is credibility. So does the site have a reputation for creating misinformation? You have sites that are specifically created for parody news, like The Onion, for example. Some people believe that's real. Do they cite sources, right? So credibility, number 2. Number 3, construction. Is there any bias in the article? Does the writer use any propaganda techniques? Then you have corroboration, right? So you need to check your information against other sources.
Yep.
And if it doesn't match, then it's a good chance it could be misinformation.
Yes. And yeah, we hate to make direct causations and correlations here, but yeah, uh, misinformation can also lead people to harm for sure. There's gonna be a relation in one way or another. It may not be direct, but yeah, just think about that. Are you putting other people in harm's way with this information that I'm sharing? You know, and time to call out people as well. Don't evade.
For sure. Okay, we have another question from the audience here from Romero. Romero asks, is there any scope? So what should we teach and what not to teach in disaster literacy?
Yeah, a note here is that they're still children, guys. So teachers, make your modules age appropriate as well, but not to the point of we're censoring what they need to hear, what they need to learn. Um, the For sure, the Philippine Department of Education has a set of modules, has a set of learning outcomes that we can abide by, and teachers, on the other hand, can are free to be creative in what they teach and what forms of method or what methods of learning and teaching that they'd use. But essentially, I don't know if there's a hard line into categorizing what to teach and not to teach. But I always go back to the core principles of being inclusive, child-centered, no, inclusive. Have you ever thought about how to teach kids with with different abilities who are into special education about the pandemic, about natural hazards? Aren't we supposed to talk about that nowadays? No. Mm-mm. And well, we're already in here, but it may be reactive in nature, but in the future, if ever a pandemic comes again, and for other hazards, we will be better prepared. Mm-mm. So there's no hard line for I don't know. I know I'm not an expert on that area. If there's but there are topics that we can engage with, but to say that we cannot teach this and we can only teach this, I don't think so. We should always just go back to the principles. It's education after all. Why are um, we pushing for lifelong learning? Why are we even enrolled in a school? Isn't it to pursue lifelong for us to unleash our full potentials as humans, right? So we always need to go back to those core principles of education, of uh, capacitating people.
Super. I just want to remind everyone watching, we're coming into the end of today's session soon, so please do put in any last minute questions you have for Miss Sam. I have one, if that's okay, Miss Sam.
Alright.
So my question for you is, what are the spaces of community education inside of schools?
Inside the schools, this is what I found out in my own research, and this may or may not be true. This is the caveat. This may or may not be true to other communities. In that particular public elementary school, they have quarterly distribution of grades. So during those times, parents or guardians are supposed to come to school physically and talk to the teachers, right? And those spaces are being maximized by the school administration in doing community education efforts, say drills, say life-saving techniques, say disaster literacy in general. And for other organizations like the Bureau of Fire Protection, our police, our Red Cross can come in, our NGOs can come in into those spaces and make the school the center for disaster education in the community. So it puts a lot of pressure. Yeah, that's the other side of it. It puts a lot of pressure into the school, but we always look at the school as something that binds the community together, and it's co-owned by the community. It doesn't alienate anyone, unless you also need to be sensitive to those who weren't able to step into elementary education. Some might be fearful of the very fact that the classroom exists. So as community organizers, community developers, we should be mindful of those aspects as well. And I almost said this in Tagalog. Ang daming pressure. There's a lot of pressure upon us all, but we have to, sit back, reflect on our own roles, and well, going back to my, I'm really advocating for my own framework. Go back to those spaces, to those nodes, because I already did the inventory there. Enter those spaces, talk to the local government official, to the school administrator, to the local NGO helping, quote unquote, helping the community become empowered. And this is the note for everyone. There's always an exit plan to whatever we're doing. Because for a community to be truly empowered, we should make sure that they co-own the process that we're doing, that it's participatory in nature, and that it's empowering. We won't live there forever. We won't help them forever, because they also need to stand on their own feet and with their human dignity intact. Okay? So hashtag walang forever in this in this kind of work. There's no forever in this kind of work. There's always an exit plan. That's our mantra in community development.
Super. So we've I always like to get a little bit of insight from the audience as well, and we have one of our audience members has given us quite a few insights. So Miss Angie, she says, as a preschool and primary education consultant, what it is important is to give children enough information to protect themselves and not too much that causes.
Exactly. They're children after all. I'm not saying that they a child is defined as someone below 18 years old. So that's up to 17 years old. You have the youth child, 15 to 17, and you have children in general. They're children and they can't really fend for themselves just yet, right? And for the other side of the definition, it's about having the abilities to become an adult. So I'm not saying that we're letting kids out into the open on their own, because that really defeats the purpose of us developing children into responsible adults. It should still be age appropriate. It should also, yeah, always think about the psychological effects on the children.
Super. We're coming to the end of our program, Sam. So I thought if I might be able to ask you, what would be your final advice to all the teachers that are watching today, and what are your final words for them?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I've said a lot already, but okay. Nowadays, it's really, really challenging to, capacitate ourselves because we can look at our virtual environments as very limiting, but we also have a plethora of information, of knowledge before our hands. So let's make sure that we continue to capacitate ourselves in terms of the trends and having access to the right information in the 21st century world. Having this literacies under our belt spells our survival and how we will thrive in the what they call the new normal after the pandemic. So for our parents, you have quote unquote kakampi in Filipino, in in all of the social institutions that are present in the community. You have the school, you have the local government, you have the national government, the agencies. It's all hands on deck again and again, and we can't just work for our own families without minding our communities where we live in. We should make ourselves a part of it and work towards the development of all. So disasters might be a scary topic, but it should not never be a taboo. Always listen to your children as well, because they also feel whatever we're feeling as adults. They may vary for sure because they are children, but try looking at things from their perspective, and you will be surprised as to what they can bring forth to the table. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Sam, for sharing that today. So everyone watching on social media, I would like to invite you as well as all the team here at MoveUp and Praxis to give a huge thank you to Miss Sam. So please do write any messages you have for Sam in the comment section. And we'll maybe flash some of these on the screen. So next up, we have, please don't go anywhere. We still have our prize to win for today's session. All right. So to win the prize, you just have to answer one question from me. All right. The first person to write a comment on Facebook with the correct answer is the winner. Okay. So your question is, what is the name of the app where you can claim the certificate for today's session? Again, what is the name of the app where you can claim your certificate for today's session? So to remind you, what is the prize while we're waiting for the winner? You will have full access to all our masterclass videos. I think I saw we have a winner, Miss Ange. Congratulations! One of our team will get in contact with you on social media to organize you to receive your prize. So thank you so much for your contributions today. You really, really, really deserve the prize. So thank you so much. All right. So we, as I mentioned before, we have not only one. We have another session coming up next week with Miss Elaine Ruiz. She will be teaching us, or she will be sharing about why creativity matters and how you can unleash creativity in your students. All right, so we will be back the same time next week for this session. If you want to register, you can head to prx.ph/creative teaching. Okay, and we also have our other webinar series, which we're running, HR What's Next. So this is a webinar series designed to help HR professionals to adapt to the new post-COVID situation, the new challenges that we're facing in managing our employees, engaging our employees. This is held every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Vietnam time or 3 p.m. Philippines time. So HR, what's next? Okay, and one last announcement from me before we go. You will be able to claim a certificate for today's session. So we are creating a course based on Sam's content to be uploaded in MoveUp later on today. All right, so you should head to the Learning and Teaching channel and subscribe so you will get notified when it becomes available later on today. Please watch this video to find out how to claim your certificate.
Thank you for learning with us. Here are the steps to claim your certificates. Step 1. Go to Google Play Store if you are using an Android device, or you can go to Apple App Store if you're using an iPhone. There, you can download MoveUp App. Step 2. Head to the Browse tab and select channels to see all the channels available on MoveUp. Choose the channel you want to subscribe to and click the subscribe button to access all the courses in the channel. Step 3. Access your My Learning tab to see all the channels that you have subscribed to. Inside the channel, you can select the course and click Begin. You will have a short pre-quiz to check your prior knowledge. Don't worry if you don't pass. Step 4. After key lessons, you will have the opportunity to answer the questions again. Make sure to answer carefully. You must score over 70% to be eligible for a certificate. Once all the lessons are completed, and if you have scored over 70% in the post-lesson tests, a button will appear to generate your certificate. If you have any difficulties, please contact us through our social media pages or email us at admin@upupapp.asia. Thank you for moving up with us.
Okay, so if you have any problem in claiming your certificate, you can please reach out to us on social media. You can go to m.me/UpUpApp.Asia. So remember, the course will be uploaded later on today. If you subscribe to the channel in MoveUp, you will be notified. We're available on iOS and on Android. Okay, that's pretty much everything from me. So I would like to give a final thank you to the organizing team from MoveUp and to PRAXIS. An extra special thank you to our keynote speaker for today's event, my friend and partner, Ms. Samantha Javier, and an extra special thank you to all of you guys watching today. I've been Jamie, and this has been Learning and Teaching, Assess, Adapt, Implement.